And in this context, you have to understand, what is this azadi? I ask, what is about Indian constitution that you hate? Tell us. We will replace it for our common good. We will move the parliament to amend that law. After all, there have been 100 amendments to the constitution. No, sir, no suggestion. What is your demand that will make you more free, will liberate you? No, sir, no demand. आजादी का मतलब क्या? ला इलाहा इल्लल्लाह. Pakistan se rishta kya? La ilaha illallah. This is the content of this agitation. Must do the content analysis. Kashmir was never part of India. That's what they say. Try engaging them in a debate. Have you studied history? Where are you saying this from? Illiterate school dropouts make these assertions. What do you do? Indian constitution is to a fault most liberal, most permissive document where from Article 25 to 30 actually deprive the majority population of privileges that are given only to minorities. That's why I say to a fault. No, sir. We don't want to live under Indian constitution. Fine, but you already have your own constitution. Incidentally, Kashmir has its own constitution. I hope some of you know this. That constitution was given to Kashmir by its own constituent assembly in 1956, good 6 years after India gave itself a constitution. Now, 6 years later, I thought they had an opportunity to improve upon Indian constitution, add some more features in order to make it even more desirable. But what did they do? There is no mention of fundamental rights in Kashmir constitution. None. There is no mention of the word minority in the constitution of Kashmir. So I must tell you, Kashmir Valley today has 99% Muslims. And they are a minority. As per Indian constitution, they get all the benefits. And we, a single-digit minority in Kashmir Valley, were majority who were discriminated against and chased out because even that small minority could not be tolerated. And why it couldn't be tolerated? I'll tell you. We, this minority in Kashmir, did not stay in ghettos. We were in every mohalla, every city, every district headquarter, every district, every village of Kashmir. Even if we lived as minority of one household surrounded by scores of non-Muslim households, we lived there. If in some villages as an exception we did not exist, we reached there because we were part of either post and telegraph or telephone, or we were school teachers, or we were part of the primary health center. Some reason we had access to the village and the population if we not lived there. So we knew every square inch of the valley by the back of our hands, and we were patriots. So if you had to create a movement of secessionism from India, you could not afford to have people who could be considered as eyes and ears of India. So the first thing you had, who knew the language, who knew the terrain, who knew the troublemakers, who knew who was up to what, and therefore could become a great deterrent. So we were killed in a targeted manner. The icons of our society were targeted, killed in marketplaces, thoroughfares, in their homes with impunity. Justice Neelkant Ganju was killed, a retired man in his 70s. Professor Sarvanand called Premi was killed right in the middle of his brows where he used to make a tilak. This scholar of Sanskrit had translated Quran into Sanskrit. He was a scholar of Persian and Sanskrit both. And he used to keep that copy of translated Quran in Sanskrit at the place of his worship. So he decided not to leave. They came to his house. They said, we have to discuss few things with him. His son said, I will come along. They said, okay, your wish. The family never saw both of them. 3 days later, the bodies were found. And he was shot right here at the forehead where he wore his tilak, Chandan tilak. Lasakol, Hridaynath Vanchu, Balkrishan Ganju, Pandit Tiklal Taplu. The list is endless. And when this happened, we were extremely terrified. I don't know how many of you have lived as a minority Hindu in an overwhelming non-Hindu community or society. I don't know. We have, and for generations. When I said first Sultan came in 1339 and his dynasty lasted 222 years, it was followed by another dynasty called Chak dynasty, followed by another dynasty called Mughals, followed by another dynasty called Pathan, till in 1819 we were up to our gills. One of my ancestors, Birbal Dhar, went to Maharaja Ranjit Singh in Lahore, said, please liberate us from Pathans. He got the army. Maharaja Ranjit Singh said, what if it is a trap and you get my people killed? He says, okay, keep my son as a guarantee. Slaughter him if it turns out to be a trap. Goes back, gets the Kashmir liberated. So 1819, this community began to breathe a little. 1947, we were handed over back to Sheikh Abdullah, who started the entire process all over again. Why did we do this? I must share this small part of history to you. This is modern history. Am I taking too long? Do I have some more time? May I? Thanks. In mid-40s of the previous century, we were on the verge of partition. At that time, British India, which was directly ruled under the Crown, decided to partition us according to the majority population provinces. So Mr. Radcliffe came and he drew a Radcliffe line, and that created Pakistan on our western, on eastern borders. But there was another entity besides British India, and this was the princely India. 565 princely states. So what do we do with them? Congress said, why don't we have a referendum in these places and let the population decide? Jinnah said no, not possible. Why? Lawyer that he was, he said, who is the sovereign in British India? The Viceroy said, the Crown. He says, fine. So has Crown done any referendum in India as to which parts want to go to Pakistan or which parts want to go to India? No. You have in your own wisdom decided to draw a line called Radcliffe line. He says, fine. So who's the sovereign in these princely states? He says, those princes and the kings. So let them decide. Why are you imposing your democracy on them? Congress wanted to get over with the task of partition. They said, okay, sir, as you wish. Now, this was not such a technical issue. The politics behind this was, in these princely states, you had a number of states where population was Hindu, but the ruler was Muslim. If you conducted a referendum, they would straight away opt for India, was the common sense. So what do? You vest the right in the king who was Muslim, who you were propping up, and who was expected to side with Pakistan. The only exception to this rule was Kashmir. So why is Jinnah willing to gamble on Kashmir and let the Hindu king of Kashmir decide on a majority Muslim population of Jammu and Kashmir? He had good reason. One, he knew Kashmir was contiguous to the forthcoming state of Pakistan. So it was easy to manage Kashmir than, let's say, manage Hyderabad Nizam or Junagadh or Bhopal, which were far away from Pakistan. So he needed kings and princes empowered in these riyasats and kingdoms. But in Kashmir he was fairly comfortable. And another reason besides the contiguity, the geographical nearness, was the land routes to Kashmir went through the incoming state of Pakistan. The land route to Srinagar went through Muzaffarabad, Uri area. The land route to Jammu, Punch went through Akhnur, that bridge. So there was no land connectivity with the India as would have emerged post-partition. From Pathankot, which was in Gurdaspur, which was in Punjab, had a Kacha road to Jammu. And from Jammu to Srinagar, there was a Kacha road where that too went through Banihal Pass, which was clogged for 6 months in a year because of snow. So there was no way India had access to Kashmir, and all the access was through Pakistan. So he thought that he had Pakistan by its neck to control it. So he gambled on it. And of course, Nizam of Hyderabad, Nawab of Junagadh, Nawab of Bhopal did throw their tantrums, and it was the sagacity of Patel and Nehru combined that they saw through the integration of India as we see it today. In Kashmir, Nehru had a hatred for Raja. He was great friends with Sheikh. Sheikh Abdullah had emerged in his own right a leader of the Muslim community in Valley. When Jinnah went to Srinagar, Sheikh tried asserting his political clout over Kashmir population. Jinnah was extremely adamant and arrogant as one and only leader of the subcontinental Muslims. So when Sheikh decided to, express terms, etc., he said, "Don't talk to me, we'll talk after partition's done." Sheikh knew how Punjabi Muslims had dealt with Kashmiri Muslims in Lahore. In winters, a lot of Kashmiris used to come down to the plains to work as head loaders, to work as manual labor. They were illiterate, unlettered, unskilled, very often exploited, and not just exploited, but humiliated. That boorish, aggressive Punjabi Musliman who today lords over Baluchs and Sinds and Pathans would treat Kashmiris even worse than these three. So he knew this, and he knew that a small population in Kashmir, which wasn't even 20-25 lakhs at that time, will be completely absorbed in the millions that existed in Pakistan. He was proved right. The way this Punjabi Muslim-dominated polity dealt with Bengali Muslims and alienated them in no time, Kashmiri Muslims would have been chicken feed. And he thought that, and he was ambitious, so he felt a little wary. Friendship with Nehru gave him probably the assurance that he has better luck in India. Maharaja, because Nehru was not paying much attention to him, in fact humiliating him, forced him to be ambivalent. Maharaja said, "I need time to decide." So he signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan, with India. Meanwhile, India was sorting out Nizam, sorting out Junagadh. That made Jinnah desperate. So despite signing a standstill agreement, first he blockaded Kashmir. The essential commodities to Kashmir like kerosene, even salt and oil were blockaded because land routes were through Pakistan. When even that didn't work, he got tribals along with his own army and Mufti to raid Kashmir. That is what made up Maharaja's mind. He signed an accession document with India. India lifted its soldiers and rolled back the invasion. Rest is history, as they say. But the same document of accession that other 565 rulers signed with India was suddenly, 2 years later, vested with lot more layers of privileges. The same Congress party, the same incoming interim government who swore about building a secular democratic polity across India decided to make concessions to Kashmir because Kashmir, being a Muslim majority, had decided to come to India as some kind of a blackmail ransom to Sheikh Abdullah. Listen, I delivered Kashmir to you, now what is in it for me? And you literally reverse the entire process when it comes to Kashmir. You give Article 370, which gives privileges to Kashmir that are not available to any other place in the country. You circumcise the jurisdiction of Indian Parliament, which has jurisdiction over every square inch of land called India, but it doesn't have jurisdiction in Kashmir. And when did this Article 370 come? It came in November 1949 when Constitution was being finalized. Not on 26th of October 1947 when the document of accession was signed. And what did Dr. Ambedkar say about this? Sheikh Abdullah comes, so he started whining to Nehru, and Nehru says, okay, please go to Bhimrao Ambedkar, he's chairman of the drafting committee, please tell him that I want a special status and 370 should be incorporated. So Dr. Ambedkar said, you want me to be traitor to the cause of India, a newly born republic, independent state of India? You want me to backstab this country by giving them privileges which are not available to anybody else? So he decided not to draft this. At that time, Nehru then told Sheikh Abdullah to go to another gentleman. His name was Gopal Swami Iyengar. Gopal Swami Iyengar used to be the Prime Minister of Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir. He was a civil servant, a bureaucrat. Gopal Swami Iyengar failed to persuade the Congress Working Committee and the Constituent Assembly. Then Nehru persuaded Patel to see this through because I want to see this through. And Patel reluctantly persuaded the Constituent Assembly to at least see this through with a prefix called temporary and transient as a concession. Dr. Ambedkar refused to do that also, and he said, if you insist on doing this, I walk out from Constituent Assembly. So when Article 370 was passed, it was in absentia of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. I must salute that man and his sense of propriety. That he said, I refuse to be part of that Constituent Assembly that passes Article 370. When every other statesman and loyal nationalist was committing this crime against India, it was Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar who refused to be a party to this decision and walked out.